and President Biden.
To announce that the United Kingdom, Australia and the United States.
As Prime Minister Morrison and Prime Minister Johnson, and I want to thank you for this partnership.
Let's talk about AUKUS. The announcement of a new strategic alliance, AUKUS, has rapidly become an international headline for political observers and the international community. This is mainly due to its potential impact on the dynamics and patterns of balance of power and major power competition in the Indo-Pacific, which, by implication, also involves many other countries in the region, including Indonesia. AUKUS is a trilateral defense pact between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, announced in September 2021 for the Indo-Pacific region. The pact includes an agreement to enhance Australia's capacity through technology transfer for nuclear-powered submarines and other underwater capabilities. An agreement to improve Australia's capacity for cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, as well as an agreement for the sale of the Tomahawk long-range cruise missile and to cooperate for the development of hypersonic missiles. AUKUS has given a strong signal that the direction of major power competition in the region will inevitably involve and perhaps be determined by arms race and a competition for military technology. Official statements from the three heads of state suggest that they are united by a common perception over shared challenges.
To meet these challenges, to help deliver the security and stability our region needs, we must now take our partnership to a new level. A partnership that seeks to engage, not to exclude, to contribute, not take, and to enable and empower, not to control or coerce.
We will have a new opportunity to reinforce Britain's place at the leading edge of science and technology, strengthening our national expertise, and perhaps most significantly, the UK, Australia, and the US will be joined even more closely together.
It's about connecting America's existing allies and partners in new ways and amplifying our ability to collaborate, recognizing there is no regional divide separating the interests of our Atlantic and Pacific partners.
First, that the threat in the future will come from a conventional security competition. And second, that there is lack of credibility on their part to more consistently prevent and deter unilateral coercive behaviors from other countries. One part of the pact that is particularly highlighted is the prospect of Australia acquiring the technology for nuclear-powered submarines. There is significant strategic value of this technology in the calculation and balance of military power. It symbolizes a rather offensive intention of the parties involved in the procurement, even if it was ultimately aimed for deterrence. Although the formation of the newly enhanced trilateral partnership agreement has not blatantly targeted any particular threats from certain countries, the AUKUS will inevitably prompt tensions with the rivals of these three countries, in particular China. Beyond China's initial response to AUKUS, that the US is employing double standard, and that the use of technology transfer is being used as means for geopolitical games, the pact is predicted to push China further to escalate their capacity to project military power in anticipation of threats from the sea. How will the trilateral security pact between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States impact Indonesia?
Indonesia melihat dan mengkhawatirkan.
Indonesia is concerned about the possibility of an increase of tension among major powers. I quote what the UN Secretary General said about the possibility of a Cold War. In this regard, I would like to mention about AUKUS and Australia's decision to acquire nuclear-powered submarines. We accept Australia's explanation. We listen to Australia's commitments to respect the principles of non-proliferation and international law. For countries like Indonesia, the current competitive context has raised concern over the possibility of having more submarines present under their seas and eventually contributing to a higher risk for war. Should Indonesia be concerned? Indonesia's foremost concern is over the potential manifestation of great power competition in its own backyard, taking the form of military power projection, especially in an arms race that involves technologies outside Indonesia's capability to defend against. The statement from the Indonesian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, released on the 17th of September 2021, conveys concern over the continuation of arms race and military power projection in the region. Even beyond being a stakeholder in the political chess game in Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific, Indonesia will be faced by a higher risk of conventional maritime threats from both sides should things escalate, in a time when Indonesia struggles to modernize its own defense capacity. The decision to transfer the technology to use nuclear power for military purposes can also predictably set a bad precedent that could lead to similar behavior from other countries. It is not entirely impossible to see similar options being sought over by unpredictable revisionist countries that have the track record to disregard international rules and laws. In Southeast Asia, AUKUS might further entrench the position of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, in mitigating the impacts of great power competition in the region. How will the Trilateral Security Pact between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States impact regional stability in Southeast Asia?
Di dalam ASEAN Society tadi saya menekankan,
what we wish to avoid is the possibility of an arms race and power projection in the region. This would threaten the stability and security of the region. First, AUKUS might encourage countries in the region to increase their respective capacities, thereby potentially triggering an arms race. For ASEAN, this trend could possibly repeal the preventive diplomacy efforts that have been carried out so far through mechanisms such as the ASEAN Regional Forum. Second, as an entity whose diplomacy efforts rely heavily on diplomatic documents and mutual agreements, ASEAN despises potentially disruptive actions that do not adhere to international and regional documents, such as ASEAN's Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
ASEAN, we have some platform to defend our regional shared interests that probably we don't want to choose between US and China, for example. And it's been in our DNA in Southeast Asia since the beginning that we want our region to be autonomous. We want to engage with all powers, but we also want that our regional interests being put at as the top priorities for ASEAN member states as well as the major powers coming from outside the region.
Security arrangements like AUKUS or Quad, will this diminish the ASEAN centrality?
This new development between Australia, UK, and the United States, of course, add more pressures for ASEAN to respond and to engage, with this and provide counter narratives. Because if we are focusing more on the military aspects or even nuclear aspects of this geopolitical competition, that would be detrimental to our interests in the region, that we want economic development, we want peace and stability in the region. And now there is a risk of this ASEAN interest, collective interest to maintain regional stability will be jeopardized by this increasing military aspect, competition of this geopolitical rivalry.
AUKUS also conceivably disturbs the continuity of ASEAN's Zone of Peace, Freedom and Neutrality Declaration, as well as its implementation on the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone Treaty.
Indonesia and ASEAN, of course, will need to work on this again to make sure that there are norms that need to be maintained by Southeast Asian countries as well as our external partners, including major powers like the United States, China or UK, who are stakeholders of the region. But then, of course, we need to make sure that all these major powers follow our norms in the region to create peace and stability.
Third, analysts are increasingly aware of ASEAN's declining relevance in mitigating the impacts of geopolitical competition between great powers. The lack of communication and diplomatic consultation between Australia and its Southeast Asian counterparts regarding AUKUS signals this. ASEAN's diplomatic position, as well as its mechanisms, risk being considered less and less relevant in managing the tensions arising from major power rivalry.
Now it's probably more difficult, but I think with a long experience of ASEAN in mitigating the consequences of geopolitical rivalry could provide lessons for us. And I do hope that we would be able to mitigate the consequences of this geopolitical rivalry. But more importantly, we would be successful in putting our regional interest and especially our national interest as the top priority.
Lastly, AUKUS could add into the list of issues that have been detrimental to the problem of ASEAN's unity in recent years. Thus far, reception from the part of ASEAN member states towards the AUKUS has been that of diverging stances. Singapore has a more hopeful view for AUKUS to contribute to the stability and peace of the region, as well as in playing a complementary role to the existing regional architecture. The Philippines has welcomed AUKUS as an effort to balance the powers in the region. The Malaysian government, much like Indonesia, has expressed concerns over the potentially destabilizing effects of the pact.
In that sense, if ASEAN could not come up with narratives and respond to this new development, there is a risk of losing relevance, because then our region will be defined by outside powers, and that I don't think we would like to see happening.
In the long run, this trend of diverging opinion would potentially hinder the efforts in making ASEAN as the go-to mechanism for its member states to address regional and global challenges.